Pricing your products for the European and UK Amazon marketplaces can be a challenging task, especially if you are a US-based seller and you are not familiar with VAT, with European value-added tax. In this video, you will learn everything you need to know in order to minimize the profit margin losses due to VAT being included in the price of the products. In this video, our guest is Alex from Simply VAT, and if you need help with the VAT questions in Europe, check the link below to Simply VAT and they will be happy to help you.
Hello, Alex. It's great to see you again on our Orange Click YouTube channel. And today you are joining me to explain something about the VAT and European and UK marketplace when it comes to pricing the products. Before we start, could you first introduce yourself and also let us know how Simply VAT helps Amazon sellers?
Of course, yeah, and thank you for having me back. I love coming onto the Orange Click channel. So yeah, my name is Alex Wyatt. I am from a company called simplyvat.com. We primarily help online retailers, marketplace sellers trade internationally compliantly by helping with VAT registrations and ongoing compliance. That includes VAT returns, maybe audits that might happen from the tax authorities, consultancy questions, etc. That's what we can help with.
And today we're going to talk about how Amazon sellers need to consider VAT when they price their products on European and UK marketplace. So why do you think it's an important topic to talk about?
Well, it's a really important topic to talk about because setting your pricing is everything in terms of making sure that your business is sustainable going into the future. You want to make sure that the prices that you set, your products on any single marketplace can go into the future, that you've accounted for VAT, that you have your own margins built in that. And we're going to talk through a few different ways to kind of approach pricing when setting up those new listings on a different marketplace, specifically within the EU, and why it's important because you'll start to see the impact in profits once we get onto some examples.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm happy you prepared some key points for us and also some examples. So let's go ahead and dive into it.
Perfect. So I'm just going to share my screen here and let's get into it. So like we mentioned, we're talking about today considering VAT in your pricing strategy. So what are we going to cover? First off, determining which markets you're going to sell into. Secondly, looking at two different ways to calculate VAT in your prices. And third, who is responsible for VAT collection. So let's get into it. First off, we need to understand which market or markets you want to trade within. This means answering questions like, where will your goods be stored and dispatched from? Where is your core target audience located? Where will you allow shipping to? And what platforms are you selling on? We would ideally like to know the answers to these questions above before setting your pricing. And so why is this? Well, VAT is paid by the end customers. So the VAT amount is calculated where the end customer is located. This is why you will want to know where your customers are or where you want to target so you can account for VAT in your prices. VAT is included in the prices listed on a marketplace or your own website when selling to the UK or the EU. It's not added at checkout like maybe in the North American market. And the VAT rates can vary anywhere between 17% and 27% depending on where your customers are located. If you are able to limit where you are shipping to, you may consider that somewhere like Hungary with 27% VAT is not somewhere where you wish to ship to, or you may need to use this information when setting your prices to make sure you don't lose any money when selling to customers in Hungary, for example. So let's look at the two different pricing options that we have. So first off, we have the one price fits all approach. So this is where you're setting one gross price, your total price, on all the platforms, no matter where your customers are purchasing from. So how do we look at this? You need to start with your gross price and then deduct the VAT depending on where your customer is located, and then you get the net price, which is the price excluding VAT in this example. So here we're looking at the gross price at 149.99 euros. a customer in Germany is going to be charged 19% VAT, whereas a Swedish customer is going to be charged 25% VAT. So in this example specifically, the difference between selling to a customer in Germany and Sweden is 9 euros. So this could be eating out of your profit margins, depending on how much profit margin you have added into that buffer. So you don't want to be losing out on any money where you could have just adjusted your prices. If we look at pricing option number 2, this is one price per country. So we are going to set a standard net price and add the VAT on top to get your gross price. So this means that each country you are taking home the same amount, but the customer will be seeing a different price depending on where they are located. And essentially the customer is taking on the different fluctuations in VAT. So if we set our net price in this example at 76.78, we then set up our price listings depending on the market we are targeting. So for the French market, we have 20% VAT, and for the Swedish market, we have 25% VAT. So the gross price that you will list on the marketplace or your own website is going to be slightly different here. We charge more, but we're earning the same after VAT is excluded, and ultimately, like I mentioned, the customer is paying that difference in the VAT rates. So when choosing this option, please consider that a customer could purchase off of different markets, websites, and it may not have that price fluctuation in place. So for example, if a Portuguese customer orders off of Amazon Spain, Spain's VAT rate is 21% and Portugal's VAT rate is 23%. So for that customer, they may have been paying a 21% VAT, or well, you may have accounted for 21% VAT in your product listing. However, you still need to charge the 23% where the Portuguese customer is located, and therefore that difference of 2%. So this is really going to be specific depending on the platform that you're using, and that's going to be really dependent on which pricing option you use when setting your pricing for your listings. So now we're going to look at who is actually responsible for paying the VAT. And we're going to start with non-EU businesses. We really need to break it down from where your company is based and then what platform you're selling on. So we're going to start with non-EU businesses selling on a marketplace. So the marketplaces are responsible to remit and collect the VAT when the goods are either being imported into the EU from outside the EU with a consignment value of less than 150 euros, or the goods are already inside the EU at the point of sale, maybe using a 3PL or Amazon FBA, and being sold to a private customer with any value. Okay. After this, then we have when it is the seller responsible in this case. Well, this is going to be if the goods are coming from outside the EU to a customer inside the EU with a consignment value greater than 150 euros, the seller is going to be responsible for the import duties and taxes. The second option is whenever a seller is selling on a marketplace and selling to a business, the seller is ultimately going to be responsible for any B2B transactions. Let's move on to EU businesses who are selling on a marketplace. So the marketplace for these cases, they're responsible for a lot less than for non-EU businesses. So marketplace sellers who are established within the EU are going to have their VAT collected only in one circumstance, which is only when the goods are being imported into the EU from outside the EU with a consignment value of less than 150 euros in intrinsic value. Otherwise, the seller is responsible to collect and remit all of the VAT for all other transactions. So these would include the goods that are being imported from outside the EU to customers inside the EU with a value greater than 150 euros. It would also include any goods that are sold within the EU that are shipped from within the EU. So this could be, again, using a 3PL or Amazon FBA when shipping cross-border or within the EU. And finally, also when goods are sold to a business, the EU-based business is responsible for collecting the VAT in these cases. And just switching from who is responsible for the payment of VAT to who is responsible for collecting. So ultimately, the seller is responsible for adding VAT in the prices on any platform that they sell on. If you're selling on your own website, it is always going to be your responsibility to collect and remit the taxes to the tax authorities. So you may need a VAT registration in the following cases. So if you're using a 3PL or Amazon FBA within the EU or UK, you will need a VAT registration domestically where you're holding your inventory. If you're selling on your own website to customers, and also if you're importing high value goods on behalf of your customers. It's great to speak to someone like a tax advisor for assistance to really get into the nitty-gritty information on, what your supply chain is, what's your product flow, to make sure that you are complying with the local tax rules. And then we can, once we know where your goods are going to from, we can start setting that pricing strategy for your listings after that. So that's all I have today for covering off pricing within your product listings. But if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me directly and I will be happy to assist.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing this information about pricing and considering VAT. So I wanted to ask, so one of the main things then that sellers who sell on European marketplace have to keep in mind is that they need to consider the VAT to the prices themselves, right? So when they add the price to Seller Central, they need to be aware that it has to include the VAT as well.
Correct. Yes. So you, as I mentioned, when you're listing it, you need to include the VAT. It doesn't matter if you are in the EU or the UK. It's your responsibility for setting the product prices. And then when we talk about who's actually paying for it later down the line, that's where it gets split up. But for when you're setting the listing prices, it's up to you to set that. Amazon's not going to calculate that for you. So if you don't include the VAT, it could mean, losing 20, 21, 22% in your margins. That's just going to be deducted.
And how often do you meet sellers who kind of didn't know about it and they set the prices just based on their own calculations about like product cost and stuff, but really didn't consider like the percentages, and then after they only learned that they're kind of probably seeing their earnings and thinking like, I'm missing a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with North American sellers that are starting to trade internationally. It's a totally different concept from sales tax added at checkout to VAT, which is, all that that sellers are including in their prices. So definitely when we're talking to American sellers that are coming over, we really try to make this clear that you need to include the VAT in your pricing. Otherwise, you're going to see a huge impact. And I think when you come from America, where the sales tax rates are a lot less, and then you're coming here and you're seeing, 20% taxes, really, as a customer, you don't see that there's 20% taxes is all or more. It's already included in the prices that you see. So for me, when I'm purchasing on Amazon, I don't actually know that I'm paying 20% taxes. It could be 5%, for all I care. Ultimately, I just see the total price, and then that's what I'm paying at checkout.
Yeah, that's very good because, there's a lot of US-based people who are watching our YouTube channel, so that's definitely a good thing. And also for all of the Europeans, if you decide to travel to US, then don't be surprised if you go to a grocery store and at the checkouts, you will be seeing that they add the tax later. So yeah, if you go with the limited budget to the store, maybe with $10 only, then you might not have enough to pay for your goods.
It throws me off every time I go back home to Canada and I go to the checkout and I go, oh no, I completely forgot that there's taxes added on. So it's definitely a different way of doing things. And so you kind of have to adapt your business when you are trading into new markets.
Okay, good. So Alex, before we wrap up, could you give us an overview of like what are the main services Simply VAT offers for Amazon sellers? I know you work together with a lot of Amazon sellers and have a years-long experience in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we've been working with Amazon sellers for now 10 years, with specifically UK and EU VAT, but we can also do Canadian GST as well. So this is including the VAT registrations, the ongoing compliance, so the regular VAT return filings that you have to submit, any consultancy, maybe you sell specific supplements and you want a reduced VAT rate for your supplements and you want to look into that country specific, we can do that. And then audits as well. Audits are coming up more and more frequently with the tax authorities. And this is because, the tax authorities are getting a lot more transparency on data that the marketplaces now have to share with them. And so these audits do come up, they do check sellers. And in that case, if you need support, maybe speaking in a local language, maybe trying to negotiate some penalties down, we do have lots of experience in that. So I would suggest getting the assistance you need to make sure that you are handling those audits to the best of your ability.
Well, sounds really good. So yeah, thanks for the overview and thanks again for joining me today. It was great to see you again and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Speak soon.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you need help with VAT in Europe, don't hesitate to contact SimplyVAT with the link below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like. If you have additional follow-up questions, use the comment section below this video. And now I would like to invite you to watch other video with Alex where she's answering frequently asked questions about VAT.